Left of the box. Charges dropped against Ontario cops in shooting death of toddler. I remember this story from a long, long time ago. This happened a while ago. And it was just so devastating. And the amount of coverage it got in Canadian media was so teeny tiny. So even here you see CBC, so you think national news. But then you got to read this. It's Toronto. So this is a local news story. So you're not going to see this on national news. And when this story first broke years ago, when the shooting happened, you had to know it existed and search for it. And it was so obscure to find this news story, and it's quite devastating. So just a warning going into this. All criminal charges have been dropped against 3 Ontario Provincial Police OPP officers who were accused in a deadly 2020 police shooting that killed a father and toddler in Kawartha Lakes, Ontario. Yeah, a baby. A baby was killed by the police in this. An armed person abducted his child on November 26, 2020 in a Toyota, and they went on a high-speed chase. Father and 18-month-old Jameson. The responding officers fired a barrage of 45 shots at the truck when it finally came to a halt after colliding with an OPP vehicle, court heard Monday. Jameson was killed at the scene. His father was taken to a hospital where he died on December 2nd, less than a week later. 3 OPP constables faced 1 count each of manslaughter, reckless discharge of a firearm with intent, and aggravated assault in relation to the boy's death. But the Crown withdrew those charges in Oshawa court on Monday. The decision came after a preliminary hearing into the high-profile shooting came to a close. In total, 12 witnesses were called by the Crown from December 15, 2023 until January 8th this year. Who do you think those witnesses were? They were all cops. All the witnesses were within the law enforcement. And we'll get to that. The 3 officers were also initially each charged with 1 count criminal negligence causing death, but the charge was previously dropped as it was found redundant. Crown Attorney Ian Blummer said to the packed courtroom, "What happened on that day was terrible, dangerous, and traumatic event for everyone involved." Blummer said the Crown had no evidence to disprove the officers' versions of events that they fired their weapons in self-defense. Therefore, there was no reasonable prospect of conviction in the case. That there is the crux of it. There was no evidence to disprove what the officers said happened. There's no webcam, body cam, no other witnesses from civilians. So there's nothing to disprove that these cops who randomly shot, well, not randomly, but shot multiple bullets into a car, knowing that this man had kidnapped his baby. They knew this, and they still wildly shot into this car. After the person who they were chasing appeared to be suicidal, he had a gun, but he was pointing the gun at himself. So he was a threat to himself and his baby. And so the cops shot him and his baby. The Crown's decision was based on information contained within the officer's notes. Blummer says the officers made the notes independently prior to consulting lawyers and before their exposure to any evidence in the case, including radio communication, other witnesses' statements. The officers had not previously released blah, blah, blah. During his address to the court, Blummer said that Jameson sustained 4 gunshot wounds, including a wound to the back and the base of the skull, which rapidly caused his death. Both father and son were in the driver's seat of the car at the time of the shooting. The Crown said no evidence suggests the officers ought to have anticipated Jameson was seated in his father's lap, he added, so they just shot into this car without confirming where the baby was, that they knew was in there. They just shot in there without confirming where that baby was, even though, again, this person was not threatening to shoot the police. He was threatening to shoot himself. So one of the cops fired a total of 25 shots, and there are 17. The officers did not engage in a panic, haphazard discharge of their firearms, Bloomer said, as they were all aimed and directed towards the driver. So they were just shooting at the driver without, again, confirming where the baby was. And, oh, it's not... You shoot 25 shots into a car and it's not panic or haphazard? Are you kidding me? You did not engage in a panic and haphazard discharge with 25 shots. How is that not panic and haphazard? Because if it wasn't panic and it wasn't haphazard, then two shots at the person directly that you've confirmed is there, and you know that the baby isn't in his lap. And also, why are you shooting at him? Yes, he had a gun, but he wasn't threatening them with the gun. He was threatening himself and his baby with the gun. During the preliminary hearing, court heard that the police responded to reports of a child who had been abducted from his mother at the family's home. Officers followed the truck trying to intercept it along Pigeon Lake Road and eventually guiding it towards a spike belt with the driver, maintaining about 170 kilometers per hour, which is almost double the highway speed limit. The Crown said that the cops saw Shapiro pointing a handgun at his own head. See? He was pointing a handgun at his own head while speeding before colliding with an OPP vehicle who had been deployed spike belt to deflate the truck tires, was left with critical injuries as a result. The cop who deployed that spike belt and had his vehicle hit. I wonder why the other cops were upset then. When the cop went to the truck, he saw Shapiro's gun still in hand. The Crown said he gave multiple commands to get the armed father to drop his weapon and show his hands, to which Shapiro responded with, "Fuck you," each time. Prior to opening fire, the cops sought confirmation from dispatch about whether the abducted child was in the truck at the time, but not all officers involved in the dispatch call were made aware that the toddler was confirmed to be in the truck, Bloomer noted. So, again, they knew that this was a child abduction case. They knew there was a strong possibility that this child was in this car with this guy. And instead, they didn't wait to confirm. They didn't wait. They didn't look. They just shot into this car. Leading up to the collision, the officers knew that he had abducted his child and was armed, making suicidal gestures and driving at incredibly high speeds. The Crown said that he had also made a sharp turn, resulting in the catastrophically violent collision that injured the other cop. Taken with Shapiro's unwillingness to drop his firearm, the collision supported the officers' concern that he was prepared to grievously injure or kill responding police officers, the Crown said. No, they were just shooting him out of vengeance, out of anger, out of frustration, that he collided into the other cop's car. They knew he was suicidal, therefore he'd be unwilling to drop his arm. And also he had his kid as a hostage. It is clear that he is the person most responsible for the events that occurred that day. Yeah, of course, but, you know, the police panically and haphazardly shooting into the vehicle also had a lot to do with them dying. Bloomer said the evidence gathered established that Jamison died as a result of at least one police-fired bullet. However, the toddler's death was a tragic, unintended consequence of the shots fired by the defendants in a genuine situation of self-defense, he said. Just remember how tragic this story was when I first heard it, and to think that now all the cops involved are just, yeah, it was self-defense. We'll just let them off. Baby died. They shot a baby. And this wasn't national news. Grand theft Autobot, so they opened fire without the suspect firing first. Shame. Yeah. Suspect didn't fire, but he hit the other car because of spike strips. And I'm curious, but again, we don't know if those spike strips led to him colliding into the car that caused the one officer to be injured. I get the feeling they were just firing because they were mad at him and they didn't care. And because of it, a baby died.